Friday afternoon sunlight poured across my apartment, warm and golden, like it was blessing the start of a perfect weekend. I hummed to myself while fixing my hair, picturing Ethan's parents' house full of laughter and the smell of his mother's lemon cake. We'd been together almost a year. I'd met his coworkers, traveled with him, spent countless weekends wrapped in his world. So when I asked what time I should be ready for the party, it wasn't a question, really. It was part of our rhythm. But the second he looked away, something inside me went still. "Just family," he said, avoiding my eyes. I laughed softly, trying to brush it off. "But I'm basically family now, right?" I teased, my voice light even as my stomach tightened. He smiled that uneasy smile I'd seen once or twice before and said, "Of course, babe. It's just complicated." That word, complicated, sank deep. He kissed my forehead, and though his lips were warm, his distance felt cold. Something was off, though I couldn't yet name it. That night, I scrolled through his mother's social media. There it was, her cheerful post. "Can't wait to celebrate with everyone tomorrow." Photos of decorations, tagged names, all except mine. I stared at the screen until the glow blurred. Everyone. I wasn't part of everyone. Love, I thought, shouldn't need an invitation. Still, curiosity, or maybe something darker, began to burn quietly in my chest. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, his word replayed in my head. Complicated. What was complicated about love? About showing up for the person you said you wanted a future with? My chest felt tight, not from anger yet, but from confusion that pulsed like a slow ache. I tried to convince myself it was just a misunderstanding, that maybe his mom really was strict about family only. Still, something inside me whispered that there was more to it. In the quiet glow of my bedroom, I started remembering little things. The late-night texts he sometimes ignored, the sudden work calls that made him step outside, the weekends he said he needed to visit his parents alone. Back then, I thought it was respect. Now, I wasn't so sure. Maybe I'd mistaken secrecy for sensitivity. I brushed my hair out of habit, as if smoothing my reflection could calm the storm gathering inside me. But denial has a short shelf life, doesn't it? When the morning came, I watched him leave with that easy confidence he always had, the one that used to make me feel safe. He kissed my cheek, said he'd call later, and walked out wearing that same blue shirt I once said brought out his eyes. I stood by the window as he drove off, my heart oddly steady now. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just quietly aware that something was about to shift. And deep down, I knew I wouldn't let this go unanswered. That evening, the city lights flickered outside my window, while I sat curled on the couch, laptop open on my knees. I told myself I wasn't snooping, just clarifying. But when your gut whispers the truth, you start chasing proof. I typed his last name into the search bar, found his mother's profile again, and there it was. Another post. Photos of the living room decked out in gold and white, the caption reading, "Family means everything." The word everything hit harder than I expected. Tag after tag, cousins, siblings, even his childhood neighbor. But not me. Not a single trace of my name. Not even a stray emoji. I stared at the screen until my reflection appeared faintly on the glass, my face half lit by the monitor. I looked calm, but my pulse told another story. Something inside me, that quiet part that always wanted to believe, started to crumble. Maybe this was the first time I truly saw the truth, raw and unfiltered. Still, I couldn't look away. I scrolled through the comments. "Can't wait to see everyone. So proud of you, Ethan." And beneath it all, that sinking realization. I wasn't meant to see any of this. But I did. And though hurt burned through me, another feeling rose quietly behind it, a strange, focused calm. Because if love was an invitation, mine had just been revoked. And somehow, I already knew I wasn't going to let that be the end of my story. The next morning felt heavier than it should have. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, but it didn't reach me. I sat in front of the mirror, coffee cooling beside me, staring at a face I barely recognized. The version of myself that kept making excuses for him. I tried to picture what he was doing right now. Smiling, mingling, maybe raising a glass to a room full of people who believed he was someone he wasn't. My reflection blinked back, calm but trembling underneath. Every possible explanation ran through my head like a carousel that wouldn't stop spinning. Maybe his mom forgot to mention me. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe. The most dangerous word when you're trying to protect your heart. But deep down, I knew better. The truth was there, quiet but unshakable. And I was done pretending not to hear it. I wasn't going to be the girl waiting by the phone while he toasted a life that didn't include me. So I stood, grabbed my purse, and slipped on the same dress he once said made me look like summer. The irony stung, but it also fueled me. My hands were steady, movements deliberate. I didn't know exactly what I was walking into, only that I needed to see it with my own eyes. Sometimes the only way to close a wound is to stop pretending it doesn't exist. The drive to his parents' neighborhood felt longer than usual, though I barely remember the streets passing by. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to, knuckles pale against the leather. Every song on the radio sounded too cheerful, too false, like background music for a life that wasn't mine anymore. As I turned onto their street, I spotted the cluster of parked cars, the faint hum of laughter, and the golden glow spilling from the windows. The party wasn't small. It was alive, loud, beautiful, and I wasn't invited. I parked 2 houses away, the engine ticking softly after I turned it off. My pulse echoed in my ears, a steady rhythm that didn't quite match the music drifting from the house. I took one deep breath, the kind that feels like a promise to yourself. If I'm part of his life, I thought, I shouldn't have to knock. But still, I would. Once. For closure. For proof. Maybe even for my own dignity. The walk up the driveway was strangely calm. The scent of barbecue mixed with fresh flowers, the sound of glasses clinking, laughter that used to make me feel included. My heart didn't race, not yet. When I reached the door, I hesitated just long enough to wonder what version of me would walk back down that path. Then I pressed the doorbell. A few seconds later, the door opened, and I was suddenly face to face with the woman who'd unknowingly built the wall between us. Her smile faltered the moment she realized who I was. "Oh, Maya, right?" she said, her tone polite but uneasy, like she was trying to remember where she'd seen me before. I forced a smile, clutching my purse a little tighter. "Yes, I thought I'd surprise Ethan. Is he here?" For a heartbeat, I almost believed she'd step aside and welcome me in. But instead, her eyes darted toward the living room, and I caught a flicker of panic there. "Well," she said softly, "this is unexpected." Before I could answer, Ethan appeared behind her, pale, frozen, eyes wide, like he'd just seen a ghost. "Maya," he stammered, "what are you doing here?" His voice was low, sharp at the edges. I tilted my head, holding his gaze. "You said it was family only," I said, "so I thought maybe it's time I met them properly." My words were steady, even if my heart was not. Around us, laughter faded. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The air grew thick, like the whole house had inhaled but forgot how to exhale. I could feel the weight of every curious stare, every whispered question. Mrs. Carter shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tightening on the doorframe. Ethan looked trapped. By me, by himself, by the truth. And for the first time, I realized something powerful. I didn't come here for him. I came here to stop disappearing. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. Music still played, but softer now, like even the speakers sensed the tension. Every face turned toward me, polite smiles fading into confusion, curiosity, and then discomfort. I stood there, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet, pretending my heart wasn't pounding. Across the room, I saw her, tall, elegant, perfectly composed, holding a glass of wine like it belonged in her hand. The way she leaned toward Ethan's father told me everything before a single word was spoken. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his tone low, almost pleading. My throat tightened, but I managed a calm I didn't feel. "Why not? Am I not welcome?" The woman turned to me, one eyebrow raised, her confidence effortless. "Who is this?" she asked, and the words sliced clean through the air. Mrs. Carter hesitated, her lips parting, her eyes flickering nervously between us. "Ethan's friend," she finally said. "Friend." The word echoed like an insult dressed in politeness. I laughed softly, not out of humor, but disbelief. Ethan stepped forward, whispering, "Maya, please, not here." But something inside me snapped. "Then where, Ethan?" I said, my voice shaking but sharp. "Where's the right place to tell me that I'm not your girlfriend, but your dirty little secret?" The murmurs started then, low, uneasy, rippling through the room like wind through dry leaves. And for the first time, he had nowhere left to hide. The elegant woman's smile faltered, her hand tightening around the stem of her glass. "Ethan," she said quietly, her voice cold but controlled. "What is she talking about?" He looked like a man drowning in his own lies, eyes darting, lips parting, searching for air that wasn't there. "It's not what you think," he muttered, but I didn't let him finish. "Really?" I asked, stepping closer, my pulse hammering in my throat. "Because I'm talking about the man who tells me he loves me every night, the man who leaves my apartment every morning with a kiss and a lie, the man who, apparently, already has you." Her expression shattered, wine spilling onto the floor as she set the glass down too quickly. The crowd gasped, some looking away, others frozen, feeding on the spectacle like it was theater. Ethan reached out, desperate, whispering, "Maya, please." But I took a step back. My voice steadied. "No, Ethan. I kept your secrets long enough. I was invisible so you could look perfect." The words surprised even me, not because they were true, but because I finally had the courage to say them aloud. Mrs. Carter covered her mouth, her face pale as the truth unfolded in front of her guests. Ethan's father looked furious, not for me, but for the embarrassment. And as for me, I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, almost eerily so. That's the thing about betrayal. Once it's exposed to light, it stops burning and starts crystallizing. It becomes something sharp enough to cut your way out. I stood there, every nerve alive, but strangely steady, like the eye of a storm. Around me, whispers swirled. My name, his name, fragments of disbelief. The woman brushed past Ethan, her perfume sharp, her heels striking the tile like punctuation marks to the end of his lies. "We're done," she snapped, and just like that, she was gone. Ethan turned to follow, but I stepped in his path. "No," I said softly. "You don't get to chase anyone tonight." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a split second, I saw the flicker of the man I once loved, but love built on deceit can't survive daylight. "Maya, I'm sorry," he started, but I shook my head. "Don't waste that word on me," I said. "You used it too often and never when it mattered." I could feel eyes watching, phones discreetly raised, every second becoming part of a story I never meant to tell. Yet, deep down, I was glad. He had made me invisible, and now everyone could finally see me. I turned toward the door, the cool night air calling to me like freedom itself. As I stepped outside, the laughter resumed inside. Quieter, uncertain, like people pretending nothing had happened. But for me, everything had. My world didn't collapse, it reset. The pain was real, yes, but so was the clarity. And as I walked down that driveway, heels clicking in rhythm with my heartbeat, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something he'd never see coming. The night air hit me like a truth I couldn't escape. Sharp, cold, cleansing. I didn't run. I walked, slow and deliberate, each step echoing on the driveway like the closing notes of a song I'd outgrown. Behind me, the door swung open, and his voice chased me down the path. "Maya, wait!" he shouted. I kept walking, hands trembling but head high. When he finally caught up, his face was pale, desperate, eyes wild with fear, not of losing me, but of being exposed. He reached for my arm, and I pulled back before his fingers could touch me. "Please," he said, breathless. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." I turned, my words slicing through the night. "To get this far? What was your plan, Ethan? Keep us both? One for family photos, one for when you got bored?" My voice didn't shake, not this time. He blinked stunned, like he couldn't believe I wasn't crying. Maybe that was his biggest shock. I was no longer the woman who waited quietly for him to choose. "It wasn't like that," he said, his voice breaking. I was going to end it with her. I almost laughed, that soft, bitter laugh that comes when you finally see through the script. Really? I asked. Because you invited her to your parents' party, not me. His silence said everything. For the first time, I didn't feel it. I let it hang between us, heavy and honest. Sometimes silence speaks louder than every lie combined. He looked at me then, really looked, like he was seeing the aftermath of his own choices for the first time. His lips parted, ready to offer another excuse, but I cut him off before he could build another wall of words. You didn't just cheat on me, Ethan, I said quietly, my voice steady even as my chest ached. You erased me. I watched his eyes flicker, guilt and shame fighting for dominance, but neither strong enough to reach his tongue. Maybe that was the worst part, realizing he didn't even have the courage to lie well anymore. He took a step closer, voice cracking. Maya, please, you have to believe me. Believe you? I repeated, my tone sharp. I believed you when you said you loved me. I believed you when you told me I was your future. And you made me invisible. I shook my head slowly, a sad smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. That's the thing about love, Ethan. It doesn't disappear overnight. You have to kill it, one lie at a time. And you did. His shoulders sagged under the weight of my words. For once, he had nothing left to defend. The street was quiet except for the faint hum of music from the house. That same song that played when I first arrived, now cruelly cheerful. I could still see faces peeking from behind the curtains, witnesses to a story that had lost its hero. He reached out again, but I stepped back, keeping the distance that should have existed all along. Don't, I said softly. Not tonight. Not ever. And with that, I turned toward my car, leaving him in the glow of his own undoing. The drive home was eerily quiet. No music, no tears, just the hum of the tires on the road and the faint smell of his cologne still clinging to my jacket. It should have hurt more, but instead, there was this strange calm washing over me, like the eye of a storm after it's done tearing everything apart. The city lights blurred through the windshield, and for the first time in months, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check for messages. I didn't wonder what he was doing. I just drove, toward something new, even if I didn't know what it was yet. When I got home, I poured a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and let the silence stretch. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of every truth I'd ignored, every sign I'd dismissed. I thought of the way he'd said complicated, the way his mother had looked at me, the way that woman's voice cracked when she asked who I was. Every moment now fit together, perfectly cruel, perfectly clear. And somehow, clarity hurt less than confusion. I leaned back, closing my eyes. My heart was bruised, yes, but beating strong, steady. That's the thing no one tells you about heartbreak. Sometimes it's not the end of love. It's the beginning of self-respect. I didn't plan revenge that night. I didn't have to. It started quietly, in the calm decision to stop being someone's secret and start being my own story. I smiled faintly. Tomorrow, I'd begin. A week passed in silence. No calls answered, no messages returned. The world had gone still, like the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. Every morning, my phone buzzed with his name lighting up the screen, and every time I let it ring out. There was a strange satisfaction in that. Not anger, not spite, just control. He'd taken my dignity in public, so I was going to take back my power in private. Calmly, strategically. I started gathering the pieces he'd left behind. Old texts, photos, the sweet nothings that now read like confessions. I didn't have to twist the truth. His own words would do that for me. Nights that once belonged to crying now belonged to planning. The sting of heartbreak had cooled into precision. It's funny. People call revenge messy, but it can be beautiful when you do it right. It's art, painted with truth and timing. When the moment felt right, I created an anonymous email. One click, one upload, and suddenly his lies had an audience. His fiancé, his parents, his boss. I didn't add a single word, no explanation, no signature. Just the truth, unwrapped and undeniable. Then I sat back, phone in hand, and waited. For once, I wasn't the one hoping for a reply. It didn't take long. The next morning, the world around him began to crumble, quietly at first, like a whisper spreading through walls. A mutual friend texted me, "Did you hear what happened to Ethan?" I didn't reply, but I knew. The truth had finally done what I never could. It had spoken for itself. Later, I saw his mother's post disappear from social media, followed by his fiancée's sudden change in relationship status, the digital unraveling of a double life. Clean, silent, poetic. That evening, a flurry of missed calls filled my screen. His name, his mother's, even his boss's office number. I didn't answer a single one. It wasn't about satisfaction anymore. It was about balance. For every moment I'd been ignored, he would now face 100 eyes staring straight through him. I poured myself another cup of coffee, watched the rain trace lines down the window, and felt something I hadn't in weeks: peace. Then, just to seal it, I opened my social media and typed a single post. Never let a man define your worth, especially one who couldn't tell the truth at a family dinner. No names, no drama, just a quiet sentence for those who knew how to read between the lines. Within minutes, the likes started rolling in, and for the first time in a long time, the story felt like mine again. By the end of the week, Ethan's world looked nothing like the one he'd built on lies. His company suspended him pending an internal review. Apparently, HR didn't appreciate the scandal making its way through office emails. His fiancée moved out, his parents stopped returning his calls, and the once perfect man who juggled two lives suddenly had no audience left to perform for. He tried to reach me one last time, a voicemail, shaky and remorseful. I listened just once, then deleted it. Closure doesn't always need a conversation. Meanwhile, I went on living. My mornings were quiet again. No anxious waiting, no pretending everything was fine. Just me, my coffee, my peace. I thought about how he'd once said I made him feel seen. The irony of it all made me smile. In the end, I was the one who showed everyone who he really was. Revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about rebuilding myself, brick by brick, truth by truth. And when I passed his name on my feed weeks later, buried under gossip and sympathy, I didn't feel hatred, just distance. Like watching an old movie whose ending I already knew too well. He'd taught me what I'd never tolerate again. And though he might forget everything else, he'd never forget the day his invisible girl finally stepped into the light and burned down his facade beautifully. Months passed, and the memory of that night softened into something distant, almost cinematic, a story I could watch without flinching. I'd found new rhythms, early walks, long talks with friends, laughter that didn't feel borrowed. One Saturday morning, I met the girls at a cozy cafe downtown. The kind with mismatched chairs, warm light, and the smell of vanilla and espresso floating through the air. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely present. No ghosts, no unfinished sentences in my chest. Just peace. We were halfway through our second round of lattes when one of them asked casually, "So, have you heard from Ethan?" I smiled before I even answered. "Actually," I said, stirring my coffee, "he sent me an invite." Their jaws dropped almost in sync. "An invite?" one asked. "To what?" I looked up, meeting their eyes, savoring the moment. His engagement party. The table went silent for half a beat, then erupted in disbelief, laughter, and a chorus of, "You're kidding!" I laughed too, a real laugh this time, not the bitter kind I'd perfected months ago. "Oh, I declined," I said, grinning. "Told him I don't crash other people's parties anymore." Their laughter filled the cafe, warm and unfiltered, blending with the clinking of cups and the hum of morning chatter. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this was my closure. Not the revenge, not the exposure, but the freedom of indifference. After the laughter faded, I sat back in my chair, watching sunlight spill across the table. It felt like a quiet victory, the kind that doesn't need applause. One of my friends reached over and touched my hand. "You know," she said softly, "you handled that with so much grace." I smiled, though part of me knew grace had come only after rage had burned itself out. Healing isn't polite, it's messy, slow, and beautifully stubborn. But that's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't end with forgetting. It ends when you stop needing to remember. As the morning drifted on, I thought about how far I'd come from that girl who waited for an invitation that never came. I'd built my peace the same way I'd built my pain, piece by piece. And though I sometimes still wondered if he ever thought of me, the thought no longer hurt. It was just a passing echo of a life that no longer fit. I'd stopped trying to rewrite what happened. Instead, I'd written something new, something entirely mine. Outside the cafe, the city buzzed. Strangers walking, horns honking, life moving forward without permission. I slipped on my sunglasses, stepped into the sunlight, and felt the weight of his shadow finally fall away. Freedom didn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrived quietly, disguised as an ordinary morning. That night, as I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror, calmer eyes, steadier hands. It struck me how healing doesn't look like joy at first. It looks like stillness, like being able to breathe without waiting for the next apology that never comes. I turned off my phone, the same one that used to light up with his name, and felt no pull to turn it back on. My world had grown quieter, smaller maybe, but infinitely more honest. Lying there, I thought about the irony of it all. Once I had been the uninvited guest in his life, standing at a doorway that never truly opened for me. Now he was the one left outside, knocking on a version of me that no longer existed. And that was the real revenge. Not anger, not exposure, but peace he'd never get to touch. Some lessons arrive wrapped in pain, others in silence. Mine came dressed as both. If I ever hear from him again, another message, another invitation, I know what I'll say. Not out of bitterness, but truth. I don't crash other people's parties anymore. Because in the end, he made me the uninvited guest in his story. But somehow through the wreckage, I became something far better, the woman he'll never be able to forget.